There was cross-party approval when the scheme was first unveiled a decade ago by the then Transport Secretary Andrew Adonis. But rising costs, the scale of disruption and uncertainties over the economic benefits have been leading some to question whether the project's worth continuing. John Beesley reports.
Behind hoardings on the edge of Birmingham city centre, yellow diggers are scooping out the foundations of an enormous new railway station. 35 minutes to the north is the constituency of Stone in Staffordshire. The second phase of HS2 will pass through here on its way between the Midlands and the North West.
It's absolutely devastating for my constituents. I've been totally against it from the beginning. I've voted against it on every conceivable occasion.
The local MP is Conservative Sir Bill Cash.
For my constituents, there is no benefit at all. It doesn't stop in the constituency. It just churns up the entire area, displaces people from their homes and creates complete chaos and devastation.
Critics like Bill Cash object to taxpayers having to shoulder the £56 billion cost of the project when they say that their own constituents receive so little in return. As a former joint head of the Government Economic Service, the economist Vicky Pryce reviewed some of the forecasts for HS2. So how does she rate its potential?
Well, the truth is that any infrastructure spending is good news. There will be benefits in terms of the numbers of construction workers. There will be some multipliers without any doubt in terms of whatever is built around some hubs that emerge. We have already seen actually that because of HS2, places like Birmingham are doing better. At least they claim that HS2 has already encouraged more inward investment. Those indeed could be substantial, but the question still remains, could one get more of a benefit by doing something different?
Right, we'll come through here. And we'll go to the Wigan Flashes Local Nature Reserve.
Gate needs a bit of oil, I think.
Yes.
Through a gate behind a housing estate 2 miles from the centre of Wigan is the point where the second stage of HS2 will meet the existing West Coast main line. The new line will bisect 52 square miles of grassland, lakes and peat bogs known as the Wigan Flashes. The Flashes are home to rare birds and insects, and conservationists like Mark Champion from the Lancashire Wildlife Trust are concerned about the impact.
It's going to be a big works depot on an area of Lightshore special site of scientific interest at Abram Flashes, and that could actually have quite a bit of damaging effect on the grasslands on that area.
Those worries come as no surprise to the town's Labour MP, Lisa Nandy.
Despite all the stereotypes about the left behind north, I probably get more letters and emails from constituents about the environment, about green open spaces than I do about any other issue.
But many of her constituents have other reasons to be sceptical about the value of HS2.
For what we'll gain, half an hour or so difference, I don't think it's worth it. And a lot of lives will be disrupted, won't they? Because they're knocking houses down to make way, aren't they? You know, there's going to be a lot of disruption for people.
I think it's a waste of time, to be honest with you. I really do. Waste of money and a waste of time. And I don't think it's necessary.
It's just become almost impossible to advocate for High Speed 2 in constituencies like mine in Wigan, where most people have had a year of rail chaos and decades before that of chronic underinvestment in our buses and in our rail network as well. I've got constituents for whom getting to work in the morning now is just a daily ordeal, and they just cannot understand why we're spending this amount of money on improving the capacity on a line to London when the real problems that they're facing on a daily basis are just simply getting to see family, friends, getting to apprenticeships and getting to work.
Rail services between northern towns and cities have long suffered a lack of investment. Last week, the regional partnership Transport for the North unveiled ambitious proposals to invest £70 billion over the next 30 years to build a new line across the Pennines and improve services between Lancashire, Yorkshire, the Tees and the Tyne. The argument is whether plans like this should take precedence over HS2. Graham Stringer is another North West Labour MP and a former leader of Manchester City Council. He believes that HS2 is vital if plans to upgrade regional services are to succeed.
Yes, we need those east-west links across the north of England. I think in the way that decisions are made in this country, that's much more likely to happen if we have HS2 going to Leeds and Manchester, because you then have to feed passengers into the system and you have to disperse those passengers who arrive in Leeds and Manchester. And that means that we will get the investment in those east-west links that we need. In a rational world, we should have had them years ago and they should stand on their own merits, but I think HS2 will push that case much further forward.
Assuming, of course, the project is completed. Some forecasts have suggested that the final cost could soar to £100 billion, and two senior cabinet ministers, David Lidington and Andrea Leadsom, have said that they're concerned that to save money, overall speeds and the number of services on the line could be reduced. I asked HS2's chief executive, Mark Thurston, if that was true.
We are building the scheme as defined by government. That's our plan. The question actually at the meeting that triggered that whole debate was, how would you save costs to the scheme? And if you changed the way the infrastructure looked, are you specified in a different way, could you get a different number? Well, of course, the actual answer is yes, but that's not what we're doing.
So you're not considering reducing the number of trains or reducing the speed on the network?
That's a decision for the government. At the moment, the government haven't asked us to look at options like that. But inevitably, as we work through some of these cost challenges, and we've been very transparent about some of the cost challenges we have, it's not unreasonable that a programme of this scale and complexity at this stage has some fluidity around those costs and schedules. And so there will be choices that we may need to make in time. That's a decision for the government, but we're very focused on delivering the scheme that they've set us.
But economist Vicky Pryce warns that amid mounting financial pressures, ministers may find it difficult to resist the temptation to redirect funds away from the project.
Looking at when this project might finish, all sorts of things will have changed in terms of patterns of work, even technology for trains. The cost seems to be escalating. And given that there is a serious drain on resources right now because of Brexit, and we have already had to borrow an awful lot more than we envisaged 2 years ago, and we will continue to do so, the budgets that have been given so far may simply not be met.
That's the economist Vicky Pryce ending that report by John Beesley. Diana, HS2 is supposed to be about redressing the north-south divide, regenerating towns and cities in the north of England, but it's not coming to Hull. Do you feel left out?
It's not coming anywhere near Hull, and it seems to me we'd quite like to have high speed one in the north, because we haven't even got that yet. So that connectivity between the east and west, I think, is where our priority should be. I think that's what the government need to commit to in terms of the Northern Powerhouse agenda. So I think, HS2, well, it started and it's going up to Birmingham, but I do question whether we ought to just pause it there and say the priority then moves to that Transpennine high-speed railway that we really do need if we're going to rebalance the economy away from the London and South East area where it's so overheated.
There do seem to be increasing people now saying that there should be a rethink of this. And Vince, wearing your former economist's hat, do you think it's good value for money, and do you think the government should press on ahead with it?
Well, not as it's presently conceived. I confess I was part of the original cross-party consensus. But I do agree with Diana, actually. I think the real priority for the country would be a Transpennine route from Hull to Liverpool, taking in Manchester and points along the way. That would do really serious good for rebalancing the country. And to the extent that we continue with HS2, I think it would make a lot more sense to do the northern bits first and work south rather than the other way around.
Yeah. Do you think there's any chance of that? I mean, the government's made this commitment, £100 billion we're looking at. Do you have some sympathy with that view that Diana expressed?
Well, it's definitely the case that the whole of the rail network does need enormous investment, and there's something like 48 billion quid, I think, at the moment that over the next few years will be ploughed into it. I think it's the biggest investment in the railways since the Victorian
most of it in London
era. Quite a lot. Come on,
two.
Let's be fair. Quite a lot of it elsewhere as well.
But the problem is the story has changed. I mean, originally we were going to have this vast strategic investment in the rail system. It's now become clear that HS2 will be at the expense of other rail projects, and that's not acceptable.
All right.